was a woman who commented on our perfectionism video and said, "We nailed it," though she felt indicted all the way through.
Good.
She said,
perfect.
"Simply awesome.
I just sent you guys the
Perfect
clips
job,
from that.
guys. Y'all nailed
But
it."
also,
And I
fuck
felt
yeah.
indicted all the way. Helped a lot, though. I'm very sure now it's not just me. Laugh emoji, laugh emoji, laugh emoji, laugh emoji, laugh emoji.
That makes me so happy. Very funny, but done.
But yeah.
Well, you have to have a complete sentence. This is how we slowly revolve, go cycle back to hieroglyphs.
I like that.
Yeah, but that's...
Ha, 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 ha. Welcome to No Clear Answers, where we explore the common challenges all humans, creators, and leaders face and break down preconceived notions of common self-help ideas. We are your hosts. I am Ricky Goldenberg.
I'm Justin Mulvaney.
And I'm Dr. Corey Wilkes.
Thank you, Corey.
Okay. You're welcome. Today,
Corey's grateful to be here. He's notoriously known for his gratitude, Corey, throughout the halls.
Yes. Gratitude, humility.
So warm.
Temperance when it comes to using profanity. Temperate as fuck.
Before we start, we've got things going on in our world. We rarely talk about. We don't really promote our stuff on the show anymore. The show kind of is promotion for us, but we rarely do explicit promotion. So I actually don't have much, but I think Ricky and Corey have some things that if you want to share with our lovely audience what's going on in your world, here's the stage.
Sure. Right now?
Yeah, right now.
So I recently started a website, newsletter / community called Your Fellow Coaches. And the whole premise of it is, if I share what I know with you and you share what you know with me, then we both walk away from that conversation knowing twice as much. So the whole point of this thing that I've created is a place for coaches to come to share what they know, to learn from each other, to grow together, both personally and professionally. So if you're a coach and you're looking for resources for coaches by coaches, or if you're looking for a community of fellow coaches that you can go to structure challenges with, network, process, goals, struggles, whatever, and just get that support from a community, you can just go to yourfellowcoaches.com. Everything is right there. So that's my new thing.
I'm in there. I've been jamming. I think Ricky's in there now, though I haven't seen her type any words in there, but we had fun. I literally on the tab next to Riverside, which we record in, I have it there because somebody triggered a spicy take that I want to drop in conversations around focusing on marketing and branding as a coach versus focusing on being a better coach. And I've wanted to have this spicy combo with a bunch of coaches. So if you're a transformational practitioner or coach listening, come join us. Come hang out.
And Justin, you have been just swell in the community. I very much appreciate, you've been super engaged. The level of thoughtfulness you put behind your responses, which I already knew you did, from knowing you and doing the podcast and shit. But the fact that you kind of take that with you into everything that you do is so valuable and just fun to see. So I appreciate you and your presence.
I've been having a lot of fun. I love coaching and I love coaches. And so when I'm with a group of people who are out there willing to get feedback, want to have the convo, I'm like, let's go. Ricky will join soon. Don't worry.
I'm in there.
You're what we call a lurker in internet terms.
I am lurking.
Yeah, you're lurking.
I am lurking. I think that one of the biggest issues that I run, because there's good shit in there. I was in there and I was like, ooh, we got some shit going on in here. The biggest issue that I run into with community-based work is that I am not a tab whore. I close tabs like it's my job. I don't want a lot of tabs. I close them out because I already have enough tabs open on my brain. So I close all the tabs when I'm doing things. And if I do that, it's gone. And so I have to make an active effort to open things up and be like, all right, I want to go to that. I have to log back in. Let's go do it. It's a thing about me. And truthfully, it's what helps me get a lot done because I do have to be incredibly efficient with my time with 2 young kids. But it also means that in moments like this that I'm like, well, I do kind of just want to lurk and have conversations and be involved. I have to think about actively doing it. Kind of
There's an
like if
app.
you were listening to the podcast, you have to think about actively opening up the section so that you can like, subscribe, and give it 5 stars. You'd have to do that.
Look at that. She snuck it in that easy. Boom. Ricky, what's going on in your world?
I have 2 things that I think that would be good to note is that I just mentioned 2 small kids. It means that I'm actually coming back from leave, which means that I have a little bit of space if folks are looking for one-on-one work. I usually work with individuals in their 30s and 40s who are established in their career and trying to figure out what comes next in it, whether it's a pivot, entrepreneurial work, leveling up, falling back in love with work. And consequently, today we're talking about boundaries. That might not be what we're talking about in the episode that you might be hearing this, because things can get sliced and diced in our lives, but these things are connected. That's a huge component of things that I work with folks on. And secondly, what I would say is that April 9th marked day 100 of 2024. And if that freaks you out, because we're probably already more than 100 days into the year, I also have an online course, which is called 100 Days. It is freaking awesome. It's all about setting yourself up for success in the next 100 days in a way that's about being really effective and efficient. It's not another like hustle bro product manage, time managey bullshit. It's actually much more around focusing and honing in on what gets you excited, what support you need, how to move through these next 100 days in a way that feels really fucking good. Only thing I'd say is that if you're interested in 100 days, do it with a friend. So you have that little accountability buddy.
100 days is so cool. Here's why I love this. I remember, Ricky, I said this on an episode before. You all did it with 100 days left in the year last year.
Yes.
That's when you did a live course cohort with it.
Yes, that's where a lot of this stems from, is working with that group.
Yeah, and it was so cool because so frequently we, like the big reflection, this type of stuff, you're either all the way in it, you're working with a coach, you're working with somebody that's continuous, or you're kind of doing it just to run the new year. And I thought it was so cool to do it with 100 days left in the year of like, no, what do you want for the end of the new year? I love it even more now because it's like mid-year. And it's like, why not ask these questions? Why not really get intentional about what do you want out of the next 100 days when most people are kind of just going to sleep and operating in that status quo? So
I think we touched on it in our resolutions episode. A lot of the things that the 3 of us were talking about is this idea of like, we shouldn't just be waiting until the end of the year to take stock. We all pretty collectively are being reflective and thoughtful about how we're growing and also using our time throughout the year. So this is a nice way to do that. But yeah, I'm open for working with maybe 2 people right now. I have that much space, and 100 days. That's what I'd say.
beautiful. I got nothing. I'm working on some stuff. My one-on-one practice is like very, very full right now. So
hey yo,
if you're interested, you can always reach out, but you
can wait.
I may put you on a wait list. Yeah, it depends on some engagements are closing, but it's been very full. I'm kind of at capacity now. So woohoo. And I'll have some things to announce coming up. So
I like that. Justin's like, what do we have to promote? I have nothing to promote. You can't even have me.
So here's the thing. Today, we're going to talk about, I don't know why my voice cracked like I'm in fucking puberty. Today, we're talking about the grind / hustle culture. So I'm assuming if you're listening to this / watching, you already kind of know what this is and have your own opinions. But we're going to explore them today. In my mind, the prevalence of hustle culture, the way we currently understand it, kind of dates back to Gary V for me, Gary Vaynerchuk. And because early on, Gary V would constantly talk about hustling and grinding it out. But the issue is the way, and even if you go back and you watch his current stuff or his previous stuff, what he's actually meaning by grinding, by hustling, is applying yourself and putting in effort instead of being entitled and just expecting all of these rewards, all of this success. But somewhere along the line, it got twisted into needlessly, wantonly, constantly working 24/7, 365, abandon all things except the pursuit of fame, of wealth, of whatever. What are y'all's thoughts to open us up when it comes to the grind / hustle culture?
It's interesting to me that you chose Gary Vee. And I think this actually illuminates. I have, when I think about grind and hustle culture, this is another one. I haven't used this term for many episodes, but it presents a polarity where I think there's a type of person where embracing the grind and the hustle is the right medicine for. And I think there's a type of person who embracing the grind and hustle is the exact opposite of the medicine for them. And I think this is most characterized by, I remember having Gary Vee in the same bucket for me. It's like Gary Vee's like the hustle and the grind guy. And I wasn't really into him. And then I think it was my sister who sent me a video. And my sister has tended to be a person in my life who is like, you can afford to chill out more. And so I was confused why she was sending me a video from Gary Vee. And this video, he was specifically talking to a person like their mid-20s, but it was all about patience. It was almost the exact opposite of this notorious hustle or grind thing that he's been for. And or what we've kind of bucketed him into. And I think this is the really interesting thing about hustle or grind culture is even the people that we associate with him, like the Gary Vaynerchuks, like you said, Corey, have a much more nuanced and much more well-rounded message that they're trying to make around hustle and grind, and a much more vast set of principles around it than you just got to hustle and grind to make it there. And as we always get to, I think there's a much more nuanced view around when does hustle grind culture make sense and when doesn't it. But I generally speaking think the way that it's commonly talked about isn't of service because it draws the people who don't need it to it and rejects the people who do need it from it. And so I think we are having the way we talk about hustle and grind is entirely not in service of actually helping people right now.
Agree. Right. Like there's not, I was, as you're talking, I just was nodding and I'm sort of, there's not something huge that I'd add. I think that the hustle and grind concept, it brings me back to other topics that we've talked about, honestly, like hacking, for example, like hustle and grind has this component of like, if I just keep going, and Corey, you talk about this a lot actually, which really resonates for me is the idea of like not being able to control the outcome. And a lot of times with hustle and grind, I think there's a desire, and perfectionism is lined in here too, which is this idea of if I just keep going, if I just keep pushing, if I just keep moving, like if I up my productivity, if I'm hacking the system, if I'm doing things perfectly, like it will come. If I built it, they will come. And at the same time, there is a lot of power in hustle and grind. What you first were describing, Corey, is the understanding and realization that oftentimes, devoid of privilege, a lot of it is going to be the work that you do that brings things forward. And it's going to be around balance. Like we can't do too much. If you go too hard on hustle and grind and you're not thinking about where that's impacting you, it's going to end up being counterproductive. That being said, I do think that hustle, grind, it can be something that can be co-opted and leveraged in a way that's really supportive and helpful and energizing and exciting and fiery, and you feel momentum and motivation, and it's just recognizing when and if that work has tipped into somewhere that's maladaptive, that's not supportive of your health and the way that you actually want to be productive, if it's impacting your ability to continue. But ultimately, hustle grind, Justin, I love what you said about the idea that it's sort of like the people that it attracts are not the people that it actually needs to attract. And I think that's because to me, hustle grind right now is sort of has that 24/7, 365 feeling around it. Whereas I think a little hustle, a little grind can be really helpful at times in doses.
So then if it started out so good and the forefathers / mothers of the grind / hustle have a lot of nuance, how did we get here to today and the common perceptions and definitions of hustle culture and grinding in your, like from your all's perspective, both in the work you do and in your own life?
Hit it, Rick. I feel like I'm always going first.
No, you're not. It's
I
because I
got a
want
lot
to
of
listen to
opinions and I want to let you people
you.
know about them.
And I want to hear your opinions. So here's what I think is that hustle grind. I'm going to step back. We're going to talk about Ford, right? 40-hour work week. Yeah. There wasn't a 40-hour work week before then. And there wasn't an expectation in terms of how many hours am I supposed to put in a day. And so what we've seen over time is that, and this is known, if you're working in a corporate setting, the data supports it. We're just working more. We always have been working more, kind of not huge amounts. It's not like, oh my God, now we work 80-hour weeks, which some of us do. But I think that ultimately we have sort of encouraged more hours of working, and it has continued to get bigger and bigger and bigger, especially as we get other things that are helpful, right? Like if I work at one of the big tech companies and my food is given to me, I can get my haircuts on site, I can see a doctor on site. It's easy to work while I'm traveling to my new office, right? There's no reason to slow down. You're making it so easy for me to work more and more and more. So that's how I think about it in the corporate setting. In a personal setting, I think that we're seeing it ultimately also because of social media. Social media is really supportive of this. There's this feeling of, I want to keep up. I want to keep doing more. I'm getting presented with everyone else is always working, right? It's, if you even think about the way that we leverage Instagram, for example, it feeds you, right? It gives you this dopamine hit and it knows that. And so every time I open that app, it's going to try to keep me in it. And so these things make it feel like, oh, I need to be on 24/7. I get a Slack ping. I'm supposed to respond. I'm expected to work, Monday through Friday, but also on Saturdays and Sundays. And so I think that culturally, we have increased the expectation of not necessarily working, but being available all the time. So I think there's a big distinction there, right? I'm not always working, but I'm always available. And I'm hustling and I'm grinding, and it feels like I'm never coming out of the matrix, basically. And so that's how I think we've sort of gotten here, is that there was a period of time, I had this conversation with my dad years ago. My dad's an engineer and from Kiev. And I had a conversation with him that I was like, how did you do work without email? Right? Like he has been working for 50 years, 55 years. You worked without email. You worked without AutoCAD. Like, how did you do it? And the way that he described it was that he was like, we did the work. We didn't get as much done probably. And he was like, and at the end of the day, you went home and no one contacted you. He was like, whereas now you're always getting emails, you're always involved. And so because of this kind of pervasive nature of the expectation of always being available, the impact of social media, this like connective tissue, right? A lot of people don't talk about work-life balance. They talk about work-life integration. And I think that lends itself to grind, hustle, ineffectively being constantly involved in your life. That was a lot of different points, but I got there. Friends. I was like, I'm over here, I'm over there, I'm over here. I have not slept. Go.
Ricky, I like this almost sociological lens you're putting on it. Like I think there's somebody's probably written a book about this. This is way out of my wheelhouse, but about there's a tension of like slowly more and more labor rights have come down, where we've created before there was no such thing as a 40-hour work week. You just worked a ton. Before then there was slave labor, right? Like there's been a tension in society of slowly providing workers with more rights and then pulling the other way. So there's one lens on this that I make up that is probably very sociological about the fundamental tension between workers' rights and work and people who hold power and things like that. I'm totally unqualified to talk about that, so I'm not going to. What I see in myself and people I work with, one narrative that I think a lot of folks were raised with that lives in a lot of our personal psychologies is, I was told a lot growing up, it doesn't matter how you do, it just matters that you put in your all. That was a big narrative that I had, and that I see a lot of people who perform well and are ambitious out in the world, like they had coded in early, all that matters is that you put in all of your max effort. And I think one way to explain why this has gotten co-opted is just so neatly plugs into that. You were raised, you were told, I don't care how you do, just give it your all. Hustle grind culture says, just give it your all. Now, I think that hooks into a naive thinking about success, but a version of success that is very appetizing, which is if you want to be more successful, just do and put more effort in. That belief has a very, very, very variable hit rate, but I think it's really appetizing to believe that about the world. And frankly, let's go back sociological. It's a great strategy for a boss to get more out of people. You're going to be more successful if you get more. And so I think there's a lot of way this gets co-opted just by how narratives live in our psychology, but also how the realities of actual work can co-opt it. And I think, Ricky, you made the point with social media. I think this is also true. So many of us tie our worth to work. And I think when that happens, well, one, we can't really source worth from work. It doesn't work, right? So we tell ourselves, I'll feel worthy if I work more. So that's the baseline belief. If I'm successful at work or I work more, I'll feel worthy. That doesn't actually work. So, and then it's easy to go, well, that's just because I'm not working enough. And therefore I work more and more in a search for something that work won't give me.
I want to hear your opinion, Corey. There was something that you said, Justin, that I think is really important to highlight, is that I also think hustle and grind, we're informed this in a corporate setting that, like, get more hours, put the work in, you're going to get better. And then I also think that some of us can actually really reject that hustle and grind because we're like, this is a capitalistic society. Like, I'm going to go home at 5. You don't need to contact. And we're able to set boundaries. I also think there's something unique here around hustle and grind when you're also passionate about what you do and you're excited and it's important to you. I think about this a lot, especially when I started my own business, which is previously beautiful work-life balance, right? I was like, work is done. I had a team that I managed. Work is done for you. Don't email me on the weekends. If I sent an email at a time that was outside of work hours, I'd make it really clear. Usually I wouldn't even send it outside of work hours out of respect for the other people that I worked with. But when I started working for myself and I really love what I do, it became much more difficult to create that separation from that hustle and grind component because I also was excited about what I was doing. And I think that's sometimes recognizing the energy of something like this can be incredibly powerful, but also can be too much as well, even if it's supporting you. And so that's a little thing that happens here too, is that I think sometimes hustle and grind shows up because we're so excited about what we're doing. And it pulls us along and takes us away from having a more holistic, thoughtful approach.
Sometimes it pulls you in a good way, though, which that's a separate thing we can explore. But that, I think I want to make one of my points in a very succinct way. It is one sentence, which is sometimes it is easier to hustle and grind than actually step back and think about. Really, let me actually just stop there. Sometimes it's easier to hustle and grind than step back and think.
Statement done. I was like, you're good, golden. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
It always makes me think of the study of the people who are left in the room and rather than sit with their thoughts, they shock themselves. Like, yeah. Yeah.
Corey.
The best way I can describe it, as far as like how we've started off with all these nuanced takes on hustling and grinding to today, is there is a difference between embracing the grind and glorifying the grind. And I think that's been the biggest shift is everybody who's ever succeeded ever will tell you have to embrace the grind, right? Like there's no substitute for doing the fucking work. You just have to do the fucking work, right? There are no hacks, no shortcuts. You just have to grind it out. It is supposed to be hard, right? Anything worthwhile is intrinsically effortful. That's just part of it, right? Even if it is something you're super passionate about and parts of it feel effortless because this is the work you can't not do, you are compelled to do, it's still a fucking grind. Like I've already had my coffee for today, so I can't show it, but my coffee cup literally says, no one cares, work fucking harder. Like your excuses don't matter. Your complaints don't fucking matter. You just have to do the fucking work, right? That's like my daily reminder. Anytime I try to throw a pity party, like, oh, this is hard. Like, motherfucker, it's supposed to be hard. If it was easy, way more people would do it, whatever the thing is, right? So that is I think part of the nuanced take of you just have to embrace the grind, right? I do jiu-jitsu. I've been training for 10 plus years. And that is the thing you constantly hear at any legitimate jiu-jitsu school of embrace the grind. You just have to grind it out. You have to show up as many days in a row as you can, or as many days throughout the week as you can. You have to drill shit. You have to rep shit over and over and over again. There's no substitute for that. All the time people say like, oh, how do I get better at jiu-jitsu? The answer every time is mat time. Meaning you need more time on the mat. You need to grind it the fuck out. You have to keep showing up even though it's fucking hard. And that holds true for entrepreneurship, for again, damn near anything that is worth doing. The issue, I
was like, don't just stop there, Corey. Keep give us more.
That was very hustly grindy. That was very hustly grindy.
Correct.
That sounded like an endorsement.
I was
like, sounded like an endorsement.
That's
yeah.
And that's the reality of it. You have to sometimes, but you can embrace the grind without glorifying it. What I have seen is a lot of like fake gurus, especially on like Money Twitter, for example, or what was formerly called Money Twitter, Money X. I don't fucking know. Basically a bunch of 20-something guys regurgitating shit that they heard without any understanding or nuance around it. They're like, oh, Gary Vee says to fucking hustle. So hustle. Here's 10 ways of making 10K this month. Fucking drop shipping or ghostwriting or blah, blah, blah. Like I see that shit all the time because I'm in the creator/solopreneur space. So I look to see like, well, who else do my ideal audience, who do they follow? And sometimes they follow these people. When a 20-year-old dude tells you, here's how you can be more productive, here's how to hustle. When you're in your 30s, period, or if you're a woman potentially, or if you have a family or you're mid-career or whatever, all the shit they say are like, that's okay. That's a good idea, right? But I'm from Appalachia. Up the holler, we say, oh, bless your heart. Meaning you dumb son of a bitch. Like you're so naive and you are glossing over all the nuances. You are glorifying the grind and hustle culture because you've seen a couple people who endorse the importance of embracing the grind, and you've seen the successes they've had because they did the fucking work. Well, now you are saying, oh, everybody just has to grind. The more you grind, the more you get. So let's just glorify the grind. Let's make it seem super hard, because the harder I make it seem, well, now I'm the person you're going to come to for the shortcut. So I'm going to make it seem super hard. And then I'm going to tell you, actually, my way, I have a shortcut. I have a hack. I have a secret to make it easy. And then I'm going to oversimplify what it means to grind, to succeed. I blame fake gurus and money Twitter. Because, and to an extent, when you were younger and less tethered, you have more privilege to do 12-hour days sometimes. Of course. Are 12-hour days great? No. But do I know anybody who has succeeded, whether that is in grad school or entrepreneurship or anything else, who hasn't had a couple dozen 12-hour days? No, I know nobody. Maybe one of you all have not had a 12-hour day at some point. All of grad school for me was just a bunch of 12-hour days.
There's
but
something
it takes
that
a toll on your health.
So there's something here that I also think is really important, which is that when we talk about grind and hustle culture, it's because you're not stopping to think, as Justin was highlighting, and we're focusing on more, like, for example, for jiu-jitsu, right? More time on mat. There's also a case to be made when we think about hustle and grind culture. There's also thoughts around efficiency and being effective and being cross-functional training too, right? It's like, I can't sit and do this all the time and forget everything else in my life. And just, I mean, maybe when you're 20, you can, but for the rest of us, it has to be more thoughtful about how we do this. And you can still have 5 hours on the mat on a Saturday. You just might not be able to have 5 hours on a mat every single day that week. And you might also have to go lift so that you have these other things that are supporting you. And the grind and hustle, when I meet someone who like does like that 12-hour day and the grind and the hustle, and all I see is fear. When I see folks who live in that hustle and grind, I see fear. That's the number one feeling that comes up when I interact with someone who is hustling and grinding. I'm like, what are you scared of? because usually they're scared of something that's completely different than what they're focusing on, right? They're so focused, and it could be a very real internalized fear. Maybe they're fear of scarcity. Maybe they're fearful of making relationships and commitment, and so they'd rather focus on this. Maybe they're whatever it is. But oftentimes, when I interact with an individual who's running on that constant wheel, which I interact with these folks a lot, right? It ultimately brings up something like why is rest so scary? Where are you avoiding and running away from being present in what is happening in your life? Justin, you got something. I can see you.
I just actually want to pull back the veil on hustle and grind culture and the how real it actually is, because let's just actually ask the question before I make my point. We all have coached a lot of people. How many of the people you know who lean into hustle and grind culture and like are making a hubbub about all the work they're doing, when you actually get intimate with them, are putting in 12 honest hours of work? How much of the grind is honest, full, I'm actually working the whole time?
There's no way.
Corey, I see you giving a no either. Like,
Yeah.
Your brain
There's
taps
being,
out. There's no fucking way.
well, because when you glorify being busy,
Yep.
you try to make yourself more busy, because now your sense of self-worth and value come from, oh, I was busy all day. That just means you weren't efficient most of the time.
It's performative. Those are the people that are working late. They're in the office. They're not doing shit.
That's what I'm
Go
saying.
home.
About the glorification, the people I know with who have spoken about like putting in all these hours will also in other conversations admit, well, there are times when I just have Slack open on my computer and I'm kind of just browsing around the internet and I can't close Slack because I'm afraid what people will think of me if I'm off. And they're doing a 12-hour day, but 3 or 4 hours of it aren't real. So they're actually doing an 8 or 9 hour day, but they're expending all this extra energy doing this like peacock dance. And so I think about when we talk about the extremes of hustle and grind culture, very few people are doing it in earnest. Very few people are doing it in, I'm so lit up and my company is both requiring this of me and I'm doing it in earnest, where that's all real time. And a lot of people are just doing this peacock dance and needing to seem like that's the case. I also think this is so obviously cultural, because I believe I first heard this from Nassim Taleb. Don't quote me on it. But he talks about how our culture is so weird now because I think he quotes the Romans. I don't remember why. He quotes some culture where nowadays we glorify the amount of effort that goes in regardless of the results. He talks about how back in this culture, again, I think it was Rome, the glorification was being able to make things look easy and effortless. And so you can easily imagine a counterculture where just as much gets done, but the culture really values like doing that with as little input as possible. And when you paint that open as a possibility, imagine if what you valued was getting as much done with as little effort as possible. How does that change your approach to what you do? And I think this is it, where we need to be able to balance both of these things, being willing to embrace the grind when necessary, but also really being willing to embrace easefulness and effortlessness when it can be done.
Justin, you're talking about making it look easy. A lot of times when people look at coaching, for example, they're like, oh, coaching's easy. You just kind of hang out and ask questions. Right? You're Ricky's laughing. And here's the thing. Each of us have, again, embraced the grind without glorifying it. Each of us has put in over a decade plus with these specific skills that we use every day as coaches. So if anybody were to see any of us do a coaching session with somebody, it would look effortless. It would look really, really easy.
Look so easy.
But it's the same thing when you look at a top tier athlete or a musician or whoever else. If you look at somebody who's a phenomenal guitarist, play the guitar, like, oh, that's so fluid, it must be easy to learn. And then you try to do it, you're like, never mind, I don't know how fingers work. Like it looks easy because the person has developed the fluidity, the efficiency you're talking about, Ricky, through putting in the reps, through grinding it out, right? Not trying to find shortcuts, not trying to do whatever, right? All of us, we've just with coaching, not anything else we do outside of it. Just with coaching, we've read books, we've put in hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours worth of actual coaching, right? Whether it is paid, free during training, whatever else, right? Like I said, like I spent many 12-hour days in grad school because that's just what you had to like you lived on campus. Like that's academia is fucking toxic, but that was one of the prices I was willing to pay to become a psychologist because that was what I had to do. Basically, that's just the structure of academia right now. But if you want to become efficient down the line, if you want to develop the fluidity that looks effortless, that other people look at you and they're like, oh, fuck, it can't be that hard because they make it look easy. The only way to do that is to do the fucking work. That's it, right? But constant grinding, right? Like without any boundaries, without any, set of like, okay, I'm off for the day, or okay, this is enough for now, whatever. The constant grinding leads to its own version of the hedonic treadmill, where you're constantly chasing more, you're grinding for more, you're trying to get more money, more fame, more followers, more this, more that, whatever. And then you burn out. That is what I see all the time, which is kind of leads me to my next question, unless you all want to add final thoughts on this part, which is why, as you get older, do you tend to either buy in less or actively hate hustle culture? Because I think all of us are in our 30s, right? At this, I'm 35. Yeah, we're all in our 30s. So comparing yourself like in your 30s to like 15 or 18, 19, 21, why, as we get older, we collectively, everybody I see tends to just be less and less about that kind of life.
I'm going to let Ricky feel the realities of life component of this because she's currently living it. As somebody who always kind of disliked it, it's somewhat hard for me to answer. I think, though, if there's one thing, I think as you get older, and let me go with Corey's Memento Mori, like there is a way where you yeah, Corey's like, fuck yeah, Justin said it. Justin normally doesn't like it, but he's endorsing it here. There is a sense of like understanding that there's a finiteness to life. Like there's, I don't know, as you hit your 30s, like your people's knees get creaky, parts of you stop working as well, and you go, oh God, I only have so much time here. And so you become more discerning with what you want your time and energy go toward. Now, I'm going to say something though. I think this actually, I think it's not universally that you get more sick of it. I actually think it splits, and I think there's a minority who buy in harder and harder into it because they are ever convinced that their self-worth will come to it. And those are the folks, Corey, who you said end up blowing up into a huge pile of flames because they can continue to commit to something that's not going to get them what they want in the end. But I think there's just a reality of mortality as well as pressures of life that settle in where you have to be more discerning with where your time goes to. It's just the simple fact of things. I think that drives you to being like this. It is not realistic to just put endless time and effort into something. I have to be more discerning. Ricky, how's the new baby?
How's my 6-week-old? Yeah. No, but full disclosure, I haven't been a hustle grinder ever, right? Like I would pull an all-nighter when I was in high school or college, and I'd be like, this is fucking dumb. Like even as I was doing it, I was like, this is fucking dumb. Usually it was because I had done something stupid, and that's why I was up late doing it, because I hadn't planned effectively. I had procrastinated, right? And so when I think about hustle grind, I think that some of it is we have more energy. Some of it is because we haven't spent time with ourselves to think about what's important to us. Or we don't have the opportunity. We're living in a space that it's like we have to just keep going, right? If you're in academia, there's no breaks. If you're working in a really intense corporate setting, that the expectation is that because you're young, you earn your stripes, you must work more. It's really difficult. And then as you get more senior, you're like, okay, now I can take a break. And some people go the other direction. The way I think about hustle and grind oftentimes is that, and for some reason, fitness is going to be the thing that hangs out with me, is that to live a full life, I think you need to have more components. And if work is the only thing you do, if your worth is your work is your worth, that's your entire life, of course, hustling and grinding is going to be easier. But if you sit down, and this is something that I think can be really effective. If you think about what you want people to say at your funeral, they're probably not, you probably don't want them to just talk about how hard you worked, right? If that is too morbid for you for the memento mori place, if you want to hang out with this is my retirement party, what are we talking about at my retirement party about me? Again, it's probably not work as much as you think it should be. And so because of that, I think that it requires to have more components with the work that we do. And some of that's forced upon us, right? I have children. I can't work those kinds of hours anymore. And some of it I think should be self-imposed. I don't think you need to have kids in order to realize like, holy shit, I shouldn't be working 14-hour days every single day. You should go have fun. You go work out, go on a trip, see your friends, go see a movie. I don't give a fuck. But like, if work is the only thing that you're doing, you are going to burn out. And it's just not a very full life. So I think that's part of it, is that as we get older, the expectations shift, life changes. We're working in different components.
Ricky, there's something really good you said at the beginning that I want to invite folks into.
And then the rest of it he didn't listen to.
I did listen to it. There's something else in there you said that I liked. That was rude. Okay. You said something like, hey, I did sometimes pull all-nighters, but I acknowledged like, oh, this is stupid. This is because I did something. I think there's a simple line of code you can put in here that's really useful if you find yourself hustling and grinding, which is, if I assume my hustling and grinding is a sign of poor planning or management, what does that illuminate for me?
Oh, yeah.
I think that's a really useful frame. And that's a really empowering one, because Corey, what we've all kind of been pointing to throughout this whole conversation, you especially, Corey, is there's a way where hustling and grinding can show up where it's deeply aligned. I find that in my coaching work now. I love my work. Some days I work until dinner, I pause at dinner, and after dinner, I genuinely go, what do I want to do? And I go, I want to keep going on this. Mm-hmm. But if I check in, that has no resonance for me. I'm doing it because I genuinely want to. And so that question kind of lets you check in. Am I doing this because I genuinely want to, or is it because there's a sign of poor management or planning that exists somewhere in here? The other point, which I'm going to share out of spite to prove to you that I kept listening, was I think there's this funeral point you make, which is at your funeral, what do you say people want to say to me? I want to bring in the voice of the skeptic here, because I was in this camp where I would say, I want people to say, I'm industrious and I worked hard and I was brilliant and I was XYZ ABC. I think a non-trivial number of people that prompt doesn't work for, myself included historically, because I want people to say these things about me. And to that, what I'll say is get feedback from some of the people around you and ask them what they really admire about you. And there's a whole nother conversation here of should you even be externalizing your approval to the people around you. But one thing that I've reliably found is usually people don't, when they ask you, what do you really love about somebody? They don't go, oh, I love them because they're so smart, or they were so productive, or they made all this money. It's very usually that's not the fabric of what people appreciate in you and in others. And so that there, I often find the argument is, I think that I will be valued for what I'm doing at work, and give yourself the opportunity to really challenge that, because I bet you that's not what people authentically value you for. Sorry, Ricky, I'm feeling some guilt for having sassed you.
I love that you sassed me. I sassed you first.
It's true. My
answer, a surprise to no one, revolves around memento mori.
What?
My God.
You want to talk about that?
As if this question was solely to tee up this point.
He prepped it just so that he could talk about it.
I was literally
hit the ball and you toss to yourself. Corey pitched himself the fattest slow ball in history, and he's about to knock it out of the park.
Yeah. When Justin said it, Corey was like, that's fine, but fuck off. That's my
I was say, listen, motherfucker, you're the one who put it out. Yeah. So actually, I was literally typing notes as you were talking. I was like, oh, memento mori is actually perfect for this. I didn't have it initially, so thanks.
You're welcome.
Here's how I kind of think about it. And I talk about memento mori and shit all the time, but using mortality as a motivator to live fully, right? One, for me, that means doing the work that matters to me, that is intrinsically rewarding, doing the work that I can't not do, right? Justin, you're talking about how sometimes after dinner, you're like, fuck, I just want to go back to this because I'm so passionate about it. both intrinsically and because I believe that it is worthwhile and valuable to put this idea out into the world, right? That is a huge piece. But the other piece is as far as why we lose this obsession with hustling specifically and the constant grind as we get older is, so like I said, I do jujitsu. And so on days that we train, when my girlfriend Rochelle and I train, I typically wind down at 4:00 because we usually get there around 5:30. If we're not training that night, I usually end around 6, and then I go, we go get dinner, and then we just do our nighttime routine. There's always more to be done, right? As a creator and entrepreneur, like, you're never done. There's always something else, right? Like either another idea you have, or you're, enmeshed in this long-term project. Like there's always something else you could do. And having a to-do list or some sort of like needle movers list helps, like, you feel like done enough for the day, but you're never done, right? The reason I end my day, even if I have a bunch of shit left to do, is like, I think a lot of people get to the end of life, or they hustle for years or decades, and they get to this point and they say, was this it? Like, is this it? Is this why I did all of this? Is this worth all the sacrifices I made, the time I didn't spend with loved ones for this? I don't want to ask that. So for me, I'm like, the reason I work, one, I love the work that I do, but the reason I work is to provide for myself and my loved ones. If I'm not spending time with my loved ones, what's the fucking point? I could go get a sales job and make a shit ton of money and clock out and not ever think of work again. When I had a regular job, as soon as I clocked out, that fucking clinic could have been on fire and I wouldn't have given a shit, because I'm like, I'm off work. I don't give a single fuck. I never thought about work when I wasn't at work. As a creator, as an entrepreneur, it's always on my mind. I'm always thinking. So I have to remind myself, why am I ultimately doing this? Right? A couple, for like Christmas and shit, we took like 2 weeks off to travel around to visit family and things. And that was 2 weeks where like I couldn't work. One, I don't work well remotely from like my laptop, but also like I couldn't edit videos. I couldn't really do much for 2 weeks. One, that showed me a lot of the weaknesses in my business of like, oh, when I get back, I need to shore up these issues because my business needs to be more self-sustaining for when I'm not there on a day-to-day basis, right? So it was a good exercise. But the reason we did it was because like your family isn't going to be around forever, right? I do, because Rick, you're talking about fitness. Another part of like hustle culture, not just business shit, is like diet and exercise and the fitness industry, right? I currently am on, I guess the current term is like an animal-based diet, right? In air quotes. I can't eat gluten. So an animal-based diet for me basically just means mostly protein, meats, and then some vegetables. Just no grains and shit. I feel way better. I have no idea if it's actually fucking healthy. I just know I feel better. And at my age, I'm going to eat in a way that makes me feel better. I don't give a fuck. So nutritionists out there, suck it. So if it's flawed, I don't give a fuck. It's doctor approved because I have a goddamn doctorate. Okay. I approve it for myself. Everybody else use your own due diligence. But here's the thing. This is why it relates. When we went and visited family, my grandma made banana bread. She's a little Appalachian 70-year-old lady, 70-plus-year-old lady who made me banana bread. This banana bread has a fuck ton of sugar in it because, Grammy don't give a shit about being healthy. Grammy's like, this is going to fucking taste good. And I'm like, Grammy gave me like 5 loaves of banana bread. It's full of sugar, full of carbs. There's nothing healthy. Oh, there's potassium in bananas. There's nothing healthy about this. It's more like cake than bread. But I eat it because for me, I'm like, there will come a day when I will never taste this bread again because Grammy's going to be gone. Because the foods you make, like your grandmother's, is never going to be like your grandmother's. That's the reality. So for me, I'm like, yes, I'm animal-based. Yes, I'm going to get inflammation. My knees are going to ache after I eat this bread for a day or two because that's just how I respond to processed sugar. But the experience of enjoying my grandmother's love through her cooking, that is worth it, despite I'm trying to grind it out and be healthy. Okay? It puts life into perspective. Okay? Because again, I don't want to get to the point in life where I'm like, is this it? one of my friends, Kay, which I'd love to have him on the show at some point. Kay is really, he's pretty big in the creator space. He writes a newsletter called Rad Reads. Check him out. Kay, Khe space HY Kay. Kay worked for Wall Street for years, made like 7 figures toward the end working for Wall Street. He grinded it out. He hustled, but he also developed a shit ton of stress and health issues. Like he said, even for years after he quit and like became like a creator, he grinded his teeth for years and years because of all of the stress of his job, of grinding it out. It takes a toll. And he basically said, eventually he was like, is this it? Am I really trying to sacrifice my health for a little more money, for a little more this? That is why I think as we get older, all of that collectively, we become disillusioned with glorifying the grind. My soapbox.
I'm going to make banana bread today.
Look, banana bread is fucking
really
delicious.
Important that you know. There is a banana. It's waiting for me. Justin, you're muted. You got to tell us are you making banana bread too?
I was saying I really didn't expect Grammy's banana bread to come up in a podcast episode about hustle grind. I'm delighted that it's here. Now I want banana bread.
I truthfully wrote down
unexpected
banana bread. Corey was dropping gems left and right, but what I took away from that was banana. It's the only thing I wrote down. Banana bread.
Listen, I love my grandma. She's never going to watch this because fun fact, she's the only person I do not cuss around ever in life. I do not cuss around her specifically. She'll never watch this because there are way too many F-bombs. But shout out to
not for her.
But so here's the thing. I would love it if she watched it, but she would literally smack, and she's like 4'9". Like she would smack the shit out of me if she heard how I talk. Is what it is. But beyond this point, how can we embrace the grind without glorifying the grind, right? For the viewers and the listeners who are wanting specific things that they can potentially take away, not even exercises necessarily, but your perspective or lessons learned in your own life. How can we embrace the grind to an extent without succumbing to the glorification of it?
Well, there's a directionality that the question imposes that I think if you're listening, which camp are you in? Are you in the camp of I'm glorifying the grind and I would benefit from moving towards embrace? Or are you in the camp of screw the grind and you don't even see the point of embracing the grind? So I think actually starting with where you're at is fairly important. I think the answer for me is kind of the same for each, which the grinding, whatever. I mean, grinding, hustling, whatever, putting in a lot of effort is neither good nor bad. That's what I hold. The actual question for me is that of alignment, which is that pushing aligned with what you really want? And the question is, what is it for? Again, there's a way for me that when grinding and hustling shows up in me and in people where I really trust the hustle and grind, it is simply them in like an effortless flow. And that's what comes up. Again, they finish dinner and they go, ooh, I notice I'm really excited to hop back into this thing. And while that looks like hustling and that looks like grinding, it doesn't necessarily have a hustly or a grindy quality to it. I think there's another quality when sometimes it's healthy where I'm sure you all have had this. Sometimes a hot opportunity comes up and your business calls you up to the hustle and grind. And it may have more grindy. It may feel like a little bit more pushy, but you are responding very intentionally to something that's calling you up to it. That's a bit of a dangerous game to play because notice if that becomes systemic and happens a lot, and then you may have to make other shifts. But the fundamental question is one of alignment. And if you're in a person who's kind of anti-hustle, anti-grind, and absolutely never goes there, one question I would actually ask you is, are you really aligned with what you're doing? Because for me, I was that camp precisely until I started doing something that I loved. And then the hustle and the grind came fairly easily. The one other point I would make here for folks who are more in the hustle and grindy camp and might be answering the question, yeah, it's absolutely what I want to do after work. Notice if it's the default and you can't not do it. This is a trap. I see people who are caught up in the glorification and the hustle and grind, but aren't able to confront it. Is they'll tell themselves, no, it's genuinely what I love to do. And then my question is like, can you not do it though? Right? Is this genuine, or is it an addiction? Because that's the fundamental difference. There are a lot of things in life I love, but if you said, can you not do that for a day? I would go, no problem. The things that you can't do that's when suddenly you're caught in the glorification, you're addicted, and probably you're hustling and grinding for some reason other than it's genuinely what I love. I love brownies, but I cannot eat brownies for weeks at a time, whereas I don't love my phone, but I could not use my phone for a day. You know why? Because I'm addicted. And so I think really asking yourself what the hustle and grind is for and coming back to alignment are the core ideas I offer. There's a way where when I see myself and founders get deeply aligned, there's no thought between hustling and grinding. There are simply days when 10, 12 hours happen, and there are days when 4 hours happen. It's just a very natural flow that happens.
Ricky, what about you?
I think all of that, very, very true. The major thing here, and I'm going to echo what Justin said. I don't know if I necessarily have something specific, but the way that I think about it is, how are you trending over time? So as Justin was saying, right, if I'm putting in 12-hour days, is that consistent? Is that always that I'm putting in 12-hour days? Am I always working instead of spending time with loved ones? Am I never able to go on vacation and actually check out from work? Am I never taking care of myself and having time to do the other things that I enjoy? Am I working so much that I don't even know what are the other things that I enjoy that are not work? Those are the moments to pay attention to it. If you notice that there's kind of this thought process, you're like, oh, I will relax when XYZ happens. Oh, when this occurs, then I will make more time for XYZ. I think that if we come back to Memento Mori, understanding that you just might never have that opportunity to have more time for XYZ, you might want to think about, how can I incorporate that now? And so again, this is not like, oh my gosh, every single day I need to spend exactly 8 hours at work and 2 hours of exercise and 1 hour with family and friends. It's more thinking about trending. So if you look over the last month, let's say, do you feel like you got to do everything that you kind of wanted to do in this month? And if the answer is, yeah, I crushed and it's great, I'm really happy, it worked, perfect. And if you're like, well, I kind of wish that I had done this more if I had an opportunity to do that, it's something to sort of assess and look for in the future. And then there's this little, the little under one, which is just paying attention to, is that grind, is that hustle a protective measure rather than something that's energizing you? Playing with that a little bit, right? If it's like, I am doing this, I'm hustling and grinding because I'm scared of not hustling and grinding, something to sort of pay attention to. And I think Justin's approach here, which is like, well, can you not work for the day, right? I worked with one entrepreneur. He's like a serial entrepreneur. He's had multiple companies. He's incredibly successful. And he is a perfect example. Like, he never stops working, but he's also not always working. Like, he's always working, but kind of not always working. And we worked together for years. And at some point I was like, well, what are the other things that you like to do? And it took years for him to feel confident that he could not work on a Saturday to go play soccer and or basketball with friends. Like, it took years to feel comfortable that he was like, you know what? It's not going to fall apart if I go and play soccer or if I play basketball, depending on the time of year. But cautionary tale, then soccer and basketball became something that he grinded at. Right? His nature was that then he was like, well, then I have to play the best in the league and I have to play soccer and I have to play basketball and I need to be training for 17 hours a day. So some of us, I think we just lend towards that level of all in-ness that we're like, I go from, I can't like separate myself. So I think it's hard for everybody. It's more about taking time and hanging out in balance and recognizing, is it bringing you joy or is it just protecting you from something that you're scared of?
Yeah, there's something I want to offer here, which is around, like, if you're in the hustle and grind camp and you're starting to identify you're a grinder and you have a hard time popping out of it, one thing that I think some of our language is pointing to is there's a way that, like, being really bought in the hustle and grind kind of is like a trance or puts you in like kind of hypnotizes you until you pop out of it. Like I'm thinking, Corey, of that story with Kay, where he, you know, he was really bought into the Wall Street thing until finally, and I've heard this over and over again with people, especially in finance, especially in industries that chew you up and spit you out, where you're kind of in a trance until finally the tension builds to a point where the bubble pops and you kind of go, is this really what I'm doing? And so a few other tools, if you notice you're in that camp, is we've talked about persona work before in like the inner critic part. Get to know your grinder. Like imagine the part of you that's obsessed with grinding, that can grind at anything. And like imagine that's another person, and what do they look like and what do they feel like? And like imagine asking them the questions, actually interviewing them. It's work I do a lot with clients. What's the most important thing to you? When did you first come into my life? This pattern, this persona that grinds. Who did I learn this from? What is this part of me that feels the need to grind afraid of? What does it most want? Right? Really get to know the full texture of the part of you that grinds. And then something we actually talked about pre-show and I learned in my training is if you're really stuck grinding, I encourage you to grind even harder. Intentionally push the grind up just to fully feel the tension, the energy of the grind, and see if it'll pop the bubble for you. You may not want to pop the bubble. You may be very happy in the trance, in which case don't worry about it. But there's a way that getting to know that part and really playing with it and getting to know it can help pop you out of the trance.
One more thing that I'd throw out there, Justin, because I think that was really helpful. Another thing that if you are not sure, like how you're feeling about a reflection of this space, try a wheel of life activity, which is just like, it's a simple wheel that you basically just rate how everything is going. And no one's is perfectly round, but it has things like relationships and work and money. And, you know, you can do a quick search. I don't know who invented it. Probably Tony Robbins thinks he does, but whatever. You go through that and it's just really quick, right? Just pull it up and be like, how am I doing in all these areas? And it's a quick rating and you start to look at it and it might give you a little bit of information as well. That if you're like, okay, my work, I'm a 10 and everything else, I'm like a 3. You can start to recognize where are the imbalances that are existing within you as well. And then maybe you do actually need to hustle and grind harder, but thinking about where that hustle and grind is applied.
For me, I think it is more about identifying, am I being purposeful or performative? Or like, where is that line between I'm doing the work that needs to be done versus I'm doing work just to do work so that I can tell people I've been busy all day, right? And if you're looking for an experiment to run, I kind of think about how can I basically combine like Parkinson's law and the Pareto principle, right? How can I basically give myself an arbitrarily short amount of time to work so that it becomes a forcing function that forces me to focus on the highest leverage things, right? I was recently watching, David Perel has a new podcast called How I Write. And he had a guy on named Lenny Rachitsky. I think I'm pronouncing that right. Sorry, Lenny, if I'm not. And one of the things that Lenny was talking about was like a compressed workday. And I think he says now he like doesn't, again, I could be butchering this, check out the episode, but he doesn't take any meetings or anything until like 3 o'clock, or he doesn't do any like work stuff until like from like 3 to 5. Before that, it's all like creative stuff, research, writing, but like no meetings, no interviews, no nothing like that. And I guess he got it from somebody else who had gotten to the point where they only work a single hour a day on like work specific things. And that has forced them to be hyper effective in only doing the things that most matter. Right? Because like if you think about it, a lot of us, and I'm especially guilty for this, which I've put in deliberate practice to not being, I'll just have like Twitter open. I'm like, oh, I'm a creator. I talk to creators. I just need to have it open. But there's this whole idea of like attentional residue, right? Where I'm working on a task. Oh, let me just go check Twitter real quick. Well, that completely fucking derails me, Versus if I say, I only have an hour for this specific task, or I only have 20 minutes for this to work on, to get through emails, for example. Well, now that is 20 minutes of dedicated, focused effort rather than 3 hours of half checking emails and half checking Twitter. It is not a foolproof strategy by far, but occasionally I'll experiment with, I'll only be in my office for 2 hours today. How much more effective am I, or am I more effective when I'm only in my office working like dedicated on shit for 2 hours versus when I'm in there for 6 to 8, right? Because what I've found is why I stop at either 4 or 6. I found that if I work until 8 or 9 versus ending at 4 or 6, I don't actually get anything else really done. And that really helped me set those better boundaries with myself to not constantly grind beyond a point of diminishing returns. So it's like, well, I can either end at 6 today and have basically the same amount done, or I can work until 9 or 10 and I'll be fucking starving. I'll be, just haggard. And then tomorrow I won't be able to show up nearly as effectively as if I just quit at a certain point today. That's been super helpful for me. So an experiment you can run.
I love how super tactical that is. Like the heuristic I use is like, just pick a day and just half the amount of time you put into work and see what happens. I think so many founders and leaders need to run that experiment because they think they have stories of how much is dependent on them. And especially if the thought of doing that scares the shit out of you, go do it. You need to, because you need to learn how many of your assumptions are goddamn wrong.
And how much shit you need to outsource to your team. Like it, because that will
how
tell
much
you
they
where
can
you're the
already
bottleneck.
handle too.
Yes.
How much they
Exactly,
can already handle without you being there.
Yep.
I also think there's something there, especially with attention residue, with which, if you want to read more about what Corey's talking about, I would say read Stolen Focus, a great book about this topic, or Deep Work by Cal Newport. Either of those books are really effective at this, which is that if you want to go and run this experiment, which is a fantastic experiment, there's a couple other things that I throw out there, which is that the first time you do it, you're going to fucking suck at it. And I think that's really important to note, is that what Corey is describing is like going all in and closing other tabs, going full window, or like walking away from your phone and being in this space that you're like, I'm just going to do like the hard work. Your brain is going to hate it. It's not going to want to do it because our brains tap out. Like by 1 hour is pretty damn good for doing this kind of like really focused, efficient, effective work. 4 hours, you're hanging out with the prodigies if you can do it for 4 hours. There's a reason why Corey says he's like at 4 to like 6 hours, I tap out, because that's, even if you're going as deep and as hard as you want, diminishing returns. And so that activity, fucking love it. And I also want to give everyone just a quick note that if you go and try this and you try to go and do hard work for 4 hours, you're not going to be able to. Just realize that like even doing 20 minutes hard work on one topic, your brain is going to want you to open Twitter. Your brain is going to want you to scroll on something. Your brain is going to want you to be like, you're going to feel like a ghost vibration. You're like, is that my phone? Is someone calling me? They're not. No one's fucking calling you. Your brain just doesn't want to focus on one thing at a time. So if you increase and encourage that kind of efficiency and effective focus, that's very real hustle and grind. And you're like getting into a flow state. You're going all in. And it's magic. And you'd be surprised at how effective it can be. And just a quick reminder, that's why we should all be hiring more mothers, because they're very efficient.
I love that. It reminds me of a term that I absolutely fucking hate, and we can do an episode on it at some point if people want. Dopamine detox. I absolutely fucking hate that term. But the idea behind it of how can I reduce stimulation and the constant need for all of this overstimulation to kind of help me reset and just think clearer and be more proactive rather than reactive, which is basically what it sounds like you're saying. Like, how can you cultivate this stillness so that you can basically set yourself up to focus deliberately on what actually needs to be done rather than chasing notifications and shit? That's super, super powerful. Final thoughts on the grind / hustle culture, or other things other soapboxes or points you want to make before we wrap up?
It's nuanced for me, this conversation about the grind and hustle. If I come back to it again, it's fundamentally the question of alignment, which is this, when I'm grinding or hustling, is it authentically aligned with me? If I'm never grinding or hustling, am I authentically aligned with my life? Because once again, when I find others are locked into 100% authentic alignment, there's no glorification or adherence to the grind. Like you said, Corey, there's an embracing of it when it feels natural or when it feels life is calling you up to it, and then a natural downregulation back to the default state. And so that ebb and flow for me is the natural result of an aligned state. And if that's not happening for you, I would start to sniff around.
Everything's good in moderation. Like, a little hustle, little grind. Why not? As long as you're creating space to also not have hustle and grind. I'm on board with everything that Justin said, but at the same time, everything in moderation.
My parting words: embracing the grind is solid. Glorifying the grind is bullshit. I had to get that in somewhere.
Yeah, somewhere.
Because it seems like I've been very pro grind.
What about fleeing the grind?
Fleeing the grind.
Fleeing. Avoiding the grind.
50-50. Depends on the context.
Yeah.
That's more what you've been saying today, and I like that.
I think there's a non-trivial, because I'll throw this last point out there. There's a way that this episode can solely be for folks who are really in grind and hustle culture. I make up that's probably not necessarily a ton of our audience. Some people probably have some of those aspects, but I know equally as many people who are really emotionally intelligent, who are very anti-grind. They're very avoidant of the grind. And let me just speak from I was that way. And what I found was, if I actually now look at knowing what I know now, that total unwillingness to grind was actually a sign that I wasn't in the right place. And so if you're totally unwilling to grind, my question for you is, are you in the right place? Because for me, when I'm just lit up loving what I'm doing, sometimes, quote unquote, the grind happens and it feels awesome.
Agreed. Find the grind for you.
Aww.
If you're fleeing the grind, find the grind. Like that.
Yeah.
Find the grind for you. It sounds a little sexual, but I'm on board either way. It still sounds good.
Ricky is pro grind, everybody. That is what you just heard.
Grinding.
All right. Anything else for today? So we can grind our way out.
I'm good. Let's grind our way out of here.
All right, everybody.
You grind out of here?
Thank you.
All right. Toodles.